Hi guys, and welcome to my admittedly very late review of the Sony Xperia Z3 Plus, but the actual reason therefore is you, because I always try to answer every possible question that I get, but this one I just never could answer before, and that was, should I get the Sony Xperia Z5 or should I just get the very similar in terms of specs Z3 Plus? Or maybe even the Z3 is enough if you come from a Z2 or Z1. Now I can finally answer that question, and I will make a little bit of a quicker comparison maybe in a separate video with the Z5, but as for right now I want to start off with the Z3 Plus and start with the overview. So in terms of design and build quality, it is very similar to the Z3. It is a little bit more edgy though, because we have this slightly raised edge that we didn't have on the old one. It feels a little bit sharper therefore, but it still feels very great in the hand because very compact and all the curves are there. The omni-balance design still looks nice, and what I like definitely a lot more this time is that we have the smoother glass, because on the old one we had this odd dragon trail that picked up a lot of fingerprints and it was very hard to clean off. This I like so much more this time. It's definitely not the most compact anymore, and it's maybe not the nicest and quite boring design by now, but I still think it works out really great and I love it after all. In terms of the display, I can't really complain too much because the overall qualities are really high. It is quite bright, maybe not the very best one in sunlight. But what I like a lot is the really amazing white point, great color saturation this time. They really fixed that from the previous version. One thing that I don't like so much still is the IPS glow and the not that deep blacks, but other than that it would be it. There is a little bit of a heating issue, but I will talk about that later in a separate heating part. Now in terms of the sound, it is pretty much what you get on the Z3 as well. It is a little bit shallow, a little bit tinny. The maximum volume is okay, but there are definitely a lot more louder devices on the market right now. It gets the job done, but the overall experience by now isn't really that great anymore. In terms of performance though, absolutely brilliant. The device is super smooth, maybe not the snappiest one, maybe not the zippiest one, but still overall very capable. 3GB of RAM do a great job overall, very capable in a really great manner, but there is the heating issue, and that is something that I want to talk about right now, because this device performs great and has a great display until it heats up. And I noticed this during my first, I admit, quite heavy setup period, but the device actually dimmed in terms of brightness quite noticeably down to like maybe 50% of brightness, and the performance, especially during harder use on mobile data or gaming, degrades very extremely. Games are almost not playable at some point and it gets very hot, and I will talk about that a little bit more in the detailed part. That's it for that. In terms of battery life though, I was actually surprised that it's not as bad as I expected it to be, because I saw some numbers before and from a few other reviews I expected the worst, but it's actually quite decent. I would say on average about 4 hours of screen time over the course of one day did get me easily through the day, so actually quite good and mostly in line with a lot of other phones these days. In terms of the software, I have already the Marshmallow update. Those does a great job, and in overall it's pretty much the same as we had on Lollipop. They didn't really add anything, but they didn't really get rid of anything, so it's still the clean minimalistic stock-like experience that I like a lot, with a few tiny little enhancements, so absolutely nice here after all. In terms of the camera, I am not blown away, but I'm definitely not disappointed. From the Z3 it actually is a step up that I didn't expect it to be. It is sharp overall, also nice videos, but also a little bit more about that later in the detailed part. If you want to jump to the conclusion now, you can just do that, or stay with me and check the detailed part, starting with the design and build quality. A little size comparison here with the Z5, just so you can see actually that, as you can see, it looks a lot thinner, and it is a little bit thinner. After all though, the length and width is pretty much identically the same, but since we have these more flat sides on the Z5 definitely feels a lot thicker in the hand, so this one feels really nice in the hand. What I mentioned already, there is this slightly raised little edge here, and that one is a little bit sharp, but it is not nearly as sharp as it was on the Z5, where I found it to be annoying. And here it is actually a little bit of a plastic border, where it is still the metal on the Z3 Plus, but what you also will see, you see maybe this white little dot, and I thought that was some kind of sand grain in between, but that is actually the metal that chipped off a little bit. So this is maybe due to the metal a little bit prone to get damaged, but on the Z5 or the Z3 that I had for 1.5 years, I had no issues with that. I guess they raised the edge because the device doesn't slide on the table so much anymore and it protects the glass. So this is definitely a smarter solution. Maybe it doesn't feel so well, but it definitely feels quite good if you use it just like that. So no real complaints. I still like the glass on glass. It is way smoother than it was before though. It picks up a lot of fingerprints, but it can get way easier cleaned this time, which is something that I definitely appreciate. And then overall, it just feels a lot more premium, especially in terms of glass. Other than that, what do we have? On the top, we have here the microphone, here the headphone jack. On the left side, we now have the flap for the SD card and SIM card tray, which is nice because you only have one flap and you won't really have to use this one a lot, because how much do you change or how often do you change the SIM card and SD card tray? But the great thing is it is still waterproof, even though having an USB port open. This is a brilliant idea. Here is the hole for the lanyard key. So great here after all. In terms of button placement, no complaints here at all. I absolutely like the position here, as you can see here, the same pretty much. And it does the job really great because this is a really comfortable position for me. And the volume rocker just a little bit below that works out quite nice. It wobbles a little bit more than it did on my Z3, but overall I think the design does an absolutely great job. I love it a lot. It feels still good, even though almost 1 year ago or 1 year later. Definitely a really well job done here, no complaints. Now let's check the display, and since it is still cold, it also will look good, but I will get to that a little bit later. Now gets into that. Display pics, 1080p IPS, and the sharpness is absolutely spot on, no complaints here. It can still rival the very best ones here. The white point is absolutely right. You still have the white color calibration that is really well, but you don't really need it anymore. It's still maybe a little bit more on the colder side, but I have no complaints. I like the white point as it is. The black though, as I already said, is not the deepest one, and we still have the IPS glow that you won't be able to see here right now because of the too bright light, but this is the one complaint that I have. The white is good, but the blacks could be deeper, and especially the IPS glow is a little bit annoying. The colors though, top spot on, really nicely saturated, really natural still after all, not boosted or something like that. The contrast ratio is nice. So in terms of the display, I was fully satisfied, if not for the IPS glow and the brightness that will degrade if you use it with a too high brightness and the device heats up a little bit, and it will heat up. So let's check the sound here, just so you can see what to expect from here. Let me quickly find that. Okay. Blocking is not really an issue because front facing stereo speakers, they do a good job in terms of placement, and during games it's nice, and it also vibrates a little bit, which is nice, but the overall sound balance is a little bit disappointing, as it was already on the Z3, and it's very similar here. It feels a little bit louder, but it's definitely way quieter than the Z5 is, and that one is already not the loudest one. So maximum volume, I would wish for more, but it actually was quite good enough in most cases, but don't expect too much. But the tonal balance is a little bit off because there is not a whole lot of bass, and the mids are very toned down with quite maybe present clear highs, which is nice, but therefore the sound in overall feels a little bit tinny, shallow, and a little bit flat. So okay, but not even with the slightly better ones is that it can compete. But now let's get to the performance, and this is something that it definitely can compete with the very best ones, because if we just get into the browser, you will see how great the scrolling performance is. Super buttery smooth. This is extremely nice, and it performs really snappy and zippy. You can jump between the apps very nice. It is very responsive. Maybe not the very fastest one in terms of loading times, but absolutely no complaints here. As you can see, all the apps run. There is a little bit of occasional stutters here and there, mostly due to the apps actually, I would blame them for, but no complaints here at all. It is a smooth device, it is a really nice device, performs really well. I really like the smooth scrolling, the zippiness. 3 GB of RAM do a great job, no complaints here at all. Multitasking works so really nice, and as you can see here, everything is totally fine. And this is actually very close to something maybe like the Nexus 6P. It's not that far off because we still after all have the same SoC, and in terms of performance it is great. But now let's get to the one point. Gaming performance is absolutely spot on. Games run really well for about 2 minutes, because then the device heats up very badly on the back where we have the NFC logo. I got temperatures at around 48 to almost 50 degrees from a normal heat from about 33 degrees. This is a lot of heating up, and it did degrade in terms of performance. Benchmark showed this, but even the gaming performance degraded heavily and you will not so much notice this in terms of normal overall use, but very well notice it in terms of the display because it will dim quite heavily. So I am a little bit disappointed, but I actually wouldn't even blame so much the Snapdragon, which is a little bit of a hothead, but they didn't manage the thermals right. They shouldn't have released a device that is prone to overheat like this so badly. And I wouldn't maybe call it overheating because it doesn't break down, it doesn't shut down, but what it does is it throttles down the performance and it throttles down or dims the screen, and this could have maybe been handled a little bit better. And they showed this, it is possible on the Z5, even though maybe not perfect, but there is room for improvement. Now, in terms of the charging times for the battery, at around 2 hours, this is absolutely in line with most of the other phones that don't have the fastest quick charge, but still totally okay, no real complaints here with me. And if we check really quick what I got in terms of values for the battery life, I have no complaints either. I was actually quite surprised that it went out so good, because as you can see here, 4 hours over the course of one day, here also slightly over 4 hours. Once again 3.5, but over the course of 2 days. This was though on Wi-Fi only, and here once again 4.5 hours, which was one of the better results. So I would say expect around an average of about 4 hours in normal mixed use and a brightness of 70%. So if you go lower, which I think though will result in a quite dim display, you can get away with more. But if you are on heavier mobile data use, then you will get a little bit of a heating issue, and maybe expect there maybe like 3.5. But I would say 4 to 4.5 in mixed use is possibly maybe closer towards 4, so not that bad. Now about the camera, and I want to get this out of the way quite quick. Selfies look quite nice, absolutely nice in terms of balance and overall contrast and all that. Really nicely done, no real complaints. It's not the very best one, but still holds up quite good. Low light capabilities maybe not that great because it's just a little bit more on the blurry side, not that grainy, but after all okay. Outside, the pictures are actually really nice, quite sharp, good contrast, good exposure and all that. But what I found to be a little bit annoying, the slow shutter speeds, because it has some processing after the fact that it takes a picture, and that one was delaying the overall experience. It just wasn't that great. Video quality is also totally fine, really smooth, no 4K though, just 1080p. So that's it, where we are limited, but the results were quite nice. The exposure transition from bright to dark was maybe a little bit harsh, but still overall no complaints here at all. So I'm done with the detailed part. So let's get to the conclusion then. What do I think of this device? Where are the flaws? Where are the pros? So just in a small comparison to the Z5, I think definitely the design is still better because it feels overall smaller, it feels just nicer in the hand, but this comes down with the caveat of the worse thermals. It just heats up a lot more, especially on mobile data. The screen dims, the performance degrades, and this will also be noticeable if you record videos, because then it will actually shut it down after some certain time of video recording. But other than that, I think the overall qualities are still quite good, because the display is really good besides the IPS display, and then we have a solid sound, great performance, until you use it maybe moderately, not that heavy at one time, not on mobile data, and it will hold up quite good. Battery is still solid enough, and all the rest is good. But the thing you have to consider, at the price at around, maybe, I'm not quite so sure, but I saw it on sale for below 300 euros already. It is a really nice choice, because it still is a premium phone that performs on a flagship level in pretty much all categories, at least definitely noticeably above average. But the issue is definitely the heat. So if you live in a hotter environment, in a quite hot region, I definitely wouldn't recommend this, because you will run into issues. But if you live maybe in a colder environment, or just use your device more sporadically, where it just doesn't have the time to heat up, you don't play any games or so, you will work out with quite fine with this device. But don't expect too much, because the heating issue is something that I didn't expect to be that noticeable, because use it in a hot environment, and now it's not even that warm here, and I already ran into the dimming display, run into performance issues, and gaming is pretty much a no-go here. Even though games perform super smooth, they just perform like that for maybe like 2 minutes, because this device gets hot very much, and this will be noticeable. So that is the downside. It's still a really nice phone, but I blame the thermal design that they used and the Snapdragon 810 for that. But it is still usable. I guess there are still a lot of people, because I've seen people on comments that just don't have the heaviest load on their device, and they will work out quite far with this device. But if you are a power user or a heavy user, then I would say maybe check out the Z5, or maybe not even that much worse, or slightly actually better in some terms, Z3. So that would be it. If you have any questions or so, now I can finally answer them, which one you should get if you want to stay in the Sony territory. I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye.